Jessica Wolfson, and I am the co-director and co-producer of Radio Unnameable.
My name is Paul Lovelace, and I'm the co-director and co-producer of Radio Unnameable.
Can you give a quick description of the movie?
Radio Unnameable tells the story of Bob Fass, who in 1962, on New York listener-sponsored station WBAI, effectively created freeform radio. He was on at midnight, and normally the stations would just sign off the air. There was kind of like the lost hours of the airwaves, and he asked the station manager, can I try it out? Can I try and do this show, stay on the air after midnight and see what I can do with it? And he basically took his experiences in the Greenwich Village as being, part of the scene there, and brought that to an on-air audience.
Now, how did you two guys meet up with Bob?
Well, we have some musician friends who would go on the air on Bob's show and had been for many, many years, and they told us, you have to check out this guy. His show is incredible. It's nothing like we've ever seen. It's totally free form. You can, we go up there and play, and then all of a sudden we're taking phone calls, and then we're talking about politics or, comedy, and it's pretty incredible. So we did some research into him, and we also found out that he is sitting on a tremendous untapped archive of thousands of reel-to-reel recordings of his show, dating back from the early 1960s, photographs, video, film, and it just, all the pieces came together, and like, this would really make a fantastic film.
Now, were you amazed also, because what got me was the footage of the riot at Grand Central Station. Were you amazed how much footage where did you get it from?
Well, that was, in addition to Bob Fass's archive, we spent years reaching out to filmmakers, people who were on the scene at that point in time. We wanted to kind of avoid the standard archival houses with the footage that you've seen a lot in other films. And we wanted to try and find something unique, ideally stuff that's never been seen before. And we were able to locate a lot. And for example, there's a scene at Grand Central Station where there's a police riot, and in March of 1967, Bob Fass and other yippies organized thousands of people to go there and protest and celebrate. And it was a big party, and it turned into a police riot, and we located two filmmakers, one who's now in Canada and the other's in Vermont, who shot 16mm footage of just brutal, it starts out beautiful, and then it gets really brutal and disturbing and upsetting, but it's an incredible document. So on top of his audio, you have this footage, and we tried to do that throughout the film, is to marry these really evocative, unique images with his singular radio program.
Do you get the idea Bob was the first flash mob creator before Twitter and Facebook?
Absolutely. Bob, in the early 1960s, instead of having your phone where you can tweet or you can, you can get on Facebook or search the internet, you had a dime and you had a payphone. And people would go and call Bob and say, I'm on the corner and there's a fire here, and, all these people, and the police, and the fire trucks aren't doing anything, or, there's no heat in my building and I am freezing and it's the middle of January, and people would call up and say, oh my God, that woman's freezing. I have an extra bedroom. She can come and sleep in my bedroom, or I know someone in the housing department. I'm going to call them up and complain that her heat hasn't been turned on. And so all these people would gather to help listeners or organize events, or just chat with whoever happened to be on the air. It could be political activists, and it could be musicians or artists, and Bob gave people the freedom to create and build the show in whatever direction they wanted to take it.
Do you think in a weird way his legacy turns into Howard Stern with the freaks of the world uniting on the radio instead of the fun folks?
Well, ironically, in regards to Howard Stern, from what we gather, he grew up on Long Island, so he grew up listening to Bob Fass, and I think he was I don't know how much of an influence he was, but I know that he's acknowledged that before, and I think that Bob, what he did, certainly led to a lot of different kinds of radio. Some of it good, some of it not so good. You know, it's just like a lot of bands started when the Ramones came out, and some of them turned out to be amazing, and some of them were horrible. You know, but the fact is, there was like a serious legacy that was, that was set in stone when he first came on the scene.
I mean, and now going back, how long did you guys spend on the project from first encountering Bob to final cut?
Almost 5 years. When we first met Bob, we started doing research on who he was or he is, and all of his different stories. And then we had to take on the extraordinary task of going through his archive. The archive, the tapes, the photographs, they were all living in his house in Staten Island. Amongst his daily possessions, no organization whatsoever. So a group of 50 volunteers actually came in and took all the tapes out of his house, organized them, wrote down everything that was on the tape boxes, and with that we created a database so that we were able to say, okay, Bob Dylan was on the show in 1965 and it's in tape, it's in box 15, and so we would be able to go grab that tape, listen to it. That was obviously a very, very time-consuming process, listening to the audio, going through all the photographs, going through all the film, and then also reaching out to other people to get more materials. So 5 years of a lot of hard work, but very, very happy with the project.
Now, which tape did you just get glued to the entire time and had to go listen to the entire show?
Well, I mean, as far as I guess to give a good example of that is that there were certain events, certain happenings that he organized in the 1960s. One was an event out at JFK Airport where he was just like, who's out there? Who's listening? Because there's no ratings after midnight. You don't really have a number. So he's like, well, let's try this. Let's try something. I want to get people together at the International Terminal at Kennedy Airport, and let's have a party. Maybe 100 people show up, maybe a couple hundred people show up. He comes out there and it's thousands, and it's just this like huge, really just inspirational, and we've talked to people who were there, just kind of a life-altering event of just there's other people like me out there. And so in that case, there was all these shows. At that point, he was on the air from midnight to 6 in the morning, 5 nights a week. So that's maybe a 5-minute scene in the film. And there's about a week leading up to it and a week afterwards, and which is just incredible radio. I mean, we listen to everything, just completely transfixed. And we're talking 50 hours, 60 hours of material that we condense and condense and condense, and put the best, or at least what we feel the best stuff is into a 5-minute scene.
And when you talk about the flash mob, I mean, that is the first flash mob, absolutely.
It almost seemed from watching it, it was like kind of the Monterey Pop Festival versus Woodstock versus Altamont moment, where between JFK and Grand Central Station and outside Grand Central Station.
That's an interesting observation. That's really, yeah, I think that's pretty apt. I mean, that's
like people went there just to enjoy themselves at JFK, and it seemed like a lot of people wanted to just enjoy themselves at Central Park, and then others just decided, hey, this is a good launching ground for my little campaign, and ripping the clock hands off.
Absolutely. I mean, and if you look at the time and the chronology of it, the fly-in was is February of 1967, and the be-in in Central Park was in March, and the yip-in at Grand Central was in May, and then Chicago and the riots in Chicago were in August. So you could see how the beginning of the year through the summer, the political tones, just the energy was getting more and more and more violent, or more and more, raised, and people are, their energies were going from fun to aggressive in, just quite a short amount of time.
Now you also focus on the 70s when Bob ran off the when they decided to turn the station 24-hour salsa.
Well, I mean, it was salsa every day of the week, and I think what happened was, I mean, the best way to sort of encapsulate the 70s for Bob Fass, and then also for WBAI, and really the counterculture at large, is that, you know, the war was winding down. It wasn't one big cause, everyone together. There were people, many different causes, and they needed to be represented too. You know, which is, BAI provided a platform for this. Bob certainly provided a platform for it, and which is very important for that to happen. But everyone doesn't always get along when you're fighting for your own turf, and it escalated and escalated and escalated, and more or less a new station manager came in, wanted to shake up the station. Listenership was down, and they did it in a way that really led to a staff revolt. And you know, you could kind of look at what happens to Bob in the 1970s, and it really mirrors what happened in the counterculture at large.
Now, it seemed like part of what got me on the 70s element was you know, I don't know if it's just the way the film presented, but it seemed like Bob had veered away from the whole free form thing with mixing music and talk and everything else, all the fun and weirdness, to, as you said, just focusing on JFK assassination.
Right.
Was that actually how the shows were breaking down during that time?
Absolutely. I think, you know, and I think it's also the culture of the 70s. If you look at it, you have the identity politics, all these different people fighting for their own particular cause, but then you also have a lot of conspiracy theories. You have a lot of, you know, everyone's taking what they were doing in the 60s and then re-examining it, or getting older and saying, well, now what? Now what's going on? And why didn't that work? Or why haven't we changed the world? And so I think people were getting very paranoid, might be the right word, in the culture. And, you know, Bob was reflecting that as well. And so having people like Mae Brussel, a conspiracy theorist, come on and talking a lot about politics, more about politics than about music, which was what he was doing in the 60s, I think, you know, definitely was the change in the culture, but also could have somewhat alienated him on the air with this, you know, with BAI.
Now, did you get the idea that this was the only unhappy place in New York in 1977?
Well, I mean, and again, think about what was happening in New York in '77. There was Son of Sam, there was the riots, there was, you know, the blackout. I mean, like, all of these different things were happening. The city was, you know, under siege. Bronx is burning. I mean, the energy level of New York was just so aggressive and negative that, you know, you could see that definitely reflects on BAI with Bob, especially with what happened at the station.
I mean, now, when they took the station off the air for, what, 3 months, it seemed like, were you doing research on it? Did you just sit there puzzled, like, what the?
Well, it's interesting, with taking stations off the air, that does happen from time to time, where a station is either in deep financial distress, or, you know, it's usually a crisis period. They say, okay, we're going to take it off the air, wipe the slate clean, and come back with a new approach. That, in this case, that was, I think that was part of the thinking. A lot of it was just panic. Like, what do? We can't have these people, you know, we can't have these discussions, this infighting, this you know, everything just aired openly over the air like this. It's destructive, which is what the board, which was their, you know, their thinking, and so they just took it off the air. But you know, it's also not a great way to build an audience.
It's
Right.
radio. You can't tell that they're not there. They're just not there.
And you don't know when they're coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, who was the hardest person that took you to track down for the interview?
No one was really. Everyone was pretty.
Or should I say unexpected, that you just threw it out randomly to say, hey, what about seeing if so-and-so will contribute, and just getting it back going, you know, quickly saying yes?
I think this was. I mean, this was a.
You know, you know what's really nice about Bob Fass is that he has developed relationships with his guests in such a way that they still remain friends, or they still think of him fondly. And so when we did call people up, like Arlo Guthrie or Jerry Jeff Walker, and said, you know, could we do an interview, they were so happy to be able to basically give back to Bob in any way they could, that it was surprising how easy it was to set these things up.
Now, here's a weird little coincidence. The short film that they showed in one of the other ones, Kiss the Paper, about a guy who does a printing company, had a Jerry Jeff Walker bumper sticker on his wall.
That's funny.
That's funny. So it's like
Things tie together.
Exactly.
Now, and Jerry Jeff Walker coming to town, was that was a good little boon there, or?
It was. That was early on in making the film, and you know, he happened to be playing, and we said, hey, why not set this up and get Bob to go? And he actually dedicated that version of Mr. Bojangles that he performs live to Bob after the show, so that was really nice.
Were you relieved that Jerry didn't try to outprice the song on you guys? so many documentarians.
Unfortunately, Jerry doesn't own the rights to it, and so we are having to deal with one of the majors in terms of the licensing. So.
But that's been pretty, you know, it's all been very smooth. I mean, everyone wanted to be part of the film, and very fortunate.
It is such an amazing little capsule of a man's life. For a guy to last 50 years on the radio, did you feel a weird kindred spirit to, I guess, the Rodney on the Rock?
Yeah.
Rodney being in high, just not in your films like his, but Rodney, there's a guy who's been a fixture for decades out in LA.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so many radio personalities who are able to develop a persona and an audience and keep an audience and really get true fans. I mean, Rodney on the Rock being a really good example of that. You know, we get emails from people, and especially on Facebook, which is so easy to connect, saying, I live in Ohio or I live in Oklahoma, but when I was 17, I listened to Bob Fass growing up in Long Island, and I saw this randomly. I found your page, and I just want to say that he really influenced me and changed my life. One really nice thing about what Bob was doing was that he was talking, and BAI in general was talking about things that nobody else were talking about. Nobody else were talking about what was actually happening with the Vietnam War or with social politics or just in New York in general. And so you get all these people, these kids, listening late at night, you know, with their transistor radios, hiding under their covers, hearing things that nobody else, that their parents aren't talking about, their teachers aren't talking about, and they're getting this real new sense of, you know, what the truth is. And I think it really kind of opened up a lot of people to, you know, hey, wait, there's something else out there. And especially in the 60s where, you know, there was such a clash between the counterculture and the regular culture, and it was such a disparate, you know, angle.
Now, how is the film, as far as the film goes? Right now you're playing the festivals at the moment?
This will be our world premiere. I mean, we haven't, we finished the film, really finished it a few days ago. We've never seen it with an audience. So we're really excited about it. I mean, it's, I'm ready right now. I mean, it's.
So you're gonna be lurking up front, trying to watch people's reactions to things.
Hopefully, sitting, enjoying it, and just.
And then we have a bunch of festivals to do for the rest of the summer, and then hopefully do a release and DVD and see where it takes us.
And you're discussing you're going to try to have some of Bob's shows be available for download or whatever?
Well, probably not for download, but you could. The idea is that I don't know if it would be us, but he's been talking to various institutions, and with the idea of acquiring his archive, and part of that would be having somewhere online where you can go and listen to an entire show. You can listen to 2 or 3 hours of New Yorkers talking amongst themselves in the middle of the night in 1974, and to Abby Hoffman, talking about the trial and after the '68 convention. So if, we hope that the film will serve as kind of a entry point where people be like, I want to hear more. You can hear him. He's still on the air today on Thursday nights at midnight. You can listen online, WBAI.org. But we hope that you can go and hear more of what the show, how the show started, and hear how it's evolved.
Because that's my first response when I was like, I need to hear this guy.
Yeah.
I want to hear the whole thing sometime.
Absolutely.
It's in the works. I would say.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
you, Joe.